Let's go over to the SEC West now. LSU stuns Alabama 32-31. They go for 2 in overtime. I can't believe Saban got out coached in this game. Now, listen, Alabama's defense has been a liability this year, and it was a liability last night. They had no answer for Jaden Daniels. But Saban going for 2 early in the fourth quarter, I believe, and costing Alabama a point. They did not get it. They get stuff short of the goal line, and then you're really wishing for a point late in the game when LSU's tied it and sends you to overtime. It felt weird. It felt like for once in his career, Saban was mortal. That he was victim to the moment was too big for him. The atmosphere was too big for him, even as well. And just some strange coaching decisions up and down. Brian Kelly came out and won this game. Look, LSU's defense is fun. They flew around. They didn't necessarily contain Bryce Young throughout the longevity of the game, but they certainly had their moments. I know freshman Harold Perkins, for all of his drama, looked great last night as an edge rusher. They've had him as a spy, but then they also bring him on a lot of pressures. I think he had 7 quarterback pressures last night. What's your take on this? I mean, gosh, it feels like Alabama's season, for all intents and purposes, is kind of over. And maybe all of a sudden there's a window of opportunity opening in the SEC West, not only this year, but going forward as well.
Yeah, I want to start talking about LSU because I think they deserve for us to talk about them first and kind of give them their props. Look, after, kind of struggling to start the year, I wonder, man, how different could their season be right now if they just didn't gaff on that extra point in New Orleans, right? If they just didn't completely whiff and blow the end of that game. How different could their season actually be looking? But man, massive props to what Brian Kelly's done with LSU and to what he's been able to build there. He's still not a culture fit. You're never going to convince me that he fits at LSU, but you don't have to fit. I know if there's one thing those people like is if you're going to win. So you could be the weirdest guy just insulting these people to their faces. And if you're winning, they're kind of not going to care. That's going to kind of let you do what you want to do. So, great job by what he's been able to do. Jaden Daniels has looked really impressive. I think what he's been able to do and kind of revive his career, make himself relevant again, with LSU. I think it's awesome for him. Love the way he's playing. Lots of gumption, lots of just, fighting, no quitting him right now. It's awesome to watch. I think LSU's cemented themselves as a top 10 team at this point. I think that they're for sure on their way to a BCS bowl. And if you believe Trey, maybe they could be, outside, playoff people. I'm ribbing a little bit, but I don't know. To talk about Alabama, earlier in this year, we were all together on the same day that Bama barely escaped Texas, right? They just barely escaped. We were all really concerned for them, saying, okay, what the heck? And I asked kind of jokingly, oh my gosh, is Saban washed? Like, is it over for Nick Saban? I think we might need to start having that conversation for real. I really do think we're starting to get to the point where, man, Nick Saban, I don't think he's got whatever it was. I think, I don't know if it's his age. I don't know if the game's starting to pass him a little bit. He made that, we talk about it all the time, he made the adjustment to be able to get that offense in the right place and to kind of change the way that they were going to do things on the offensive side of the football. That extended the dynasty. But I'm starting to wonder, like as recruiting has gotten a little bit better for a lot of these other programs, starting to kind of take the talent away from him. As you start to see them lose a couple of these extra games, get that on the locker room a little bit. Like, is this the end of Nick Saban's, not tenure? I'm not saying he's going to lose his job, but is this kind of the end of him being the absolute, unquestioned king of college football? And are we going to start to see him come back down to earth and see if maybe another dynasty can kind of rise up there? Is Kirby Smart ready to take his place up there at the top if they can repeat or even three-peat, right? Because I know that next year's schedule doesn't look too tough for the Dogs either. I mean, come on, you're talking about at Alabama. You got the reigning Heisman Trophy quarterback. You've got one of the best defensive ends that we've seen in years playing for you. You've got a stud of a running back who's averaging 6.8 per carry this year. I mean, you've got pieces. Your receivers, maybe they're not nearly as good as what they have been in the past, but you've got pieces. You should be able to commit this and scheme this in a way that, you can start winning some of these bigger games. And here you are losing to Tennessee and LSU in the same year. I mean, there are a couple plays away from being, 8-4 if A&M calls a different play on the goal line, and if Texas can, make one more kick or extra point somewhere in that game. I mean, they've been pretty close this year. And man, I wonder if is it the edge? I don't know. It doesn't look like it's the same team. They're not nearly as physical. They're not playing at the same edge. I think this is the decline for Alabama. I think this is kind of the last year we're going to be talking about Bama being the unquestioned leader of this sport. They might still win another championship with him there. I still believe in his ability as a coach, but I don't think he's going to, have the advantages that he's had in the past.
Yeah, it certainly feels like Georgia and Alabama have kind of switched places, at least in their perception, in my mind, of where they rank nationally and in the SEC. Everything, whether or not this dynasty is over, whether or not, Saban is washed, that is all going to depend on what he does this offseason. This season, he's done. Like, they are not going to the playoff this season, barring some just absolutely hysterical breaking through of like an open shot to Atlanta and a shot at Georgia. And that doesn't look possible with Ole Miss and LSU both in their way and having, a loss ahead in the loss column and LSU basically having 2 games over them. So it looks like, the aspirations for this year are done. What he does this offseason is going to determine if the program is still up to that standard going forward, because I think he has the 2 worst coordinators he's ever had at Alabama. Bill O'Brien needs to be gone before this season. Like, he needs to be gone yesterday. I
So
don't
does
know
Pete
why we.
Golding.
Yes, exactly. Like,
Yep.
it's the worst combination he's ever had as a head coach, especially at Alabama. I feel very comfortable saying that. And I don't know if it's just that coordinator and assistant carousel finally catching up with him. I don't know if it's bad culture fits from the transfer portal. I don't know what it is. I do know that he had the highest ranked, by talent, average talent recruiting class last year. So it's not a talent issue. I wonder if it's a new generation of athlete that's just not responding to his type of coaching. I know I've mentioned this on the podcast before. He's been open about having to coach a different way the last couple of years because the kids just haven't responded to the way that he used to coach. And it's a new generation. If he can't adapt to that new generation of athlete that's coming to him, those kids aren't changing. And short of him, going to coach at a military academy, he's not going to get a different type of kid that's going to respond to a hard nosed same way he coached the rest of his career. So that's not an indictment on him. I'm not saying he abused anybody in the past. I'm not saying this new generation of athlete is too soft or anything like that. But it's a different generation of kid. And you have to adapt to that if you want to be successful with that type of kid, because some coaches you can see are being successful with that and others might be slipping away. So I don't want to make, 1 or 2 losses just an indictment on the whole man's career or on his future aspirations. But Jaden Daniels basically beat him single-handedly last night.
He did.
And if this was 2015 Alabama, the final score of that game is 21-3 Alabama.
Yeah.
Because he's going to take away, he's going to scheme and take away, and his defensive coordinator, whoever it would be, Kirby or whoever it would be, would just scheme that away. They would take away the best weapon, and LSU wouldn't have been able to move the ball. And in 2022, that's not what happened. He let one player beat him, probably for the first time since Bo Wallace was at Ole Miss. So,
oh gosh, yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's scary if you're an Alabama fan right now. This is uncharted territory. You haven't been this pessimistic about your football program probably since 2006.
I wonder what they do with all their free time. I agree. Bill O'Brien, Pete Golding, both gotta go. They are not good. And I think a lot of it just seems like, certainly defensively, it feels like, look, man, you got some of the best talent in the country. I mean, you're constantly in the top 2 or 3 recruiting classes. Figure it out, man. Like, you've got juniors and seniors. It's not like they're a young team. And yet Pete Golding just seems like he's unable to adjust. And especially when you have an athletic quarterback like Jaden Daniels. And it's not like he's just running the football. He threw it well against them last night as well. Poor tackling by the Bama secondary. I mean, it was not fun to watch if you were a Bama fan. I completely agree. I think there's a come to Jesus moment that needs to happen in Tuscaloosa, which is crazy to talk about that with 2 losses when other programs have that at 3, 4, 5 losses. But it is what it is.
I wonder if he was trying to be too cutting edge with the transfer portal, because I think coming into the season, we saw the addition of Jahmyr Gibbs and who was the corner? They also got the corner from
Ricks,
LSU.
Eli Ricks.
Yeah, Ricks. And we were like, oh goodness, like this transfer portal rule was supposed to even out the talent, and Alabama is just taking advantage of it more than anybody. I think what made Alabama so deadly was just the buy-in to the culture that everyone in that building had. And if you bring in these transfers that are used to being the guy at their school, like Gibbs was at Georgia Tech. I'm not saying Gibbs is a cancer or anything like that. He's been a great weapon.
He's been
them,
great.
but just getting the same buy-in is way tougher when you get a guy out of the transfer portal versus, recruiting him for 2 or 3 years in high school and then having him show up as a freshman and earn that spot rather than just maybe it being given to him.
Yeah, I want to point to that is the big guy that I was thinking was Tyler Harrell, the wide receiver that came over from Louisville.
Yeah,
And he
absolutely.
has not been a factor this year. I don't even know if he's really played or seen anything like significant on the field, but he just hasn't been a factor. He was supposed to be their best receiver, the next, big name Bama receiver to go off and be considered for the bullet and all the other. It's like he was supposed to be that guy, and he hasn't played. Like, and I think if I remember correctly, I might be making this up, but if I remember correctly, earlier in the season, there were rumors that there were like behavioral issues that was why he couldn't make the roster and he couldn't end up getting on there. So that
Well,
goes to your point, Trey.
He's on the team. He just,
But yeah, he wasn't able to actually get into playing time and all that. But to your point, Trey, I mean, that's a huge factor. Why? Like, if he's a guy who doesn't have his head on straight and he's not locked into their process at Alabama, then that's going to not just affect him and the team that was counting on him to be the guy, but also affect the players around him who see that and say, I could do that too.
Gracious him. How about